church may be sued over the tax-exempt status is the second point. The third point, religious adoption agencies would be challenged by government agencies to give up their long-held right to place children only in homes with both a mother and father. He points out the error in the common example of Catholic charities in Boston, religions that sponsor private schools with married student housing may be required to provide housing for same-sex couples. He points out some of the errors in there as far as and this is all the errors, the technical errors in here of the initial analysis, but these whole things are missing the point, because what ends up happening, and this first point was a perfect example of this, is that when you alter a fundamental legal definition, it doesn't always happen inherently that that automatically changes things right away. Sometimes it does, but oftentimes it takes quite a while for the whole legal system to readjust when you've redefined a word, or when you've redefined, or when you've just given a new governing maxim and principle. The moment they said, the moment they overturned separate but equal, and they changed it to separate but not equal, it took a while for that whole thing to be built in. Now, of course, I'm not saying I think the separate but not equal is correct. And in fact, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I point out how redefining marriage creates a situation in which it is separate but not equal for kids. And that's often, I haven't really seen anybody address it, because at least nobody on the no on Prop 8 side that's adequately addressed it. Those that feel they have are basically the ones that say that gender is irrelevant, and I would just love to see the no on Prop 8 side use that as their tagline and try to publish that to the whole of California and see how many supporters they get. Because I really don't think if you publish to all of California the intellectual foundation, the only tenable intellectual foundation for their view, which is that gender is irrelevant, I really don't think California, as a majority of Californians, would agree that gender is irrelevant. But again, addressing this whole idea of a fundamental shift, and this is one of the key things, and there's several other, the equality issue, one of them with kids, and there's several other issues I have, and I don't have time to get into all of them. I could do many videos, all of them, but there is these 6 points, even though they're technically screwy in a lot of ways, and this is actually kind of rather child's play for the most part for this lawyer, more say Thurston. It's missing out on the whole underlying thing. If you can redefine marriage and you allow that to work in over time, then you can just gradually shift the whole system one way. Now, some of you will say, whoa, that's a slippery slope fallacy. You're getting into slippery slope fallacy. Now, the one thing with that claim is, well, then anybody, you could technically take anybody trying to project what could potentially be coming in the future, and you could say you're committing a slippery slope fallacy. I'm not saying what specifically will come out of altering the definition of marriage. I don't know the details. I have guesses. I have estimates. I have all sorts of ideas of what might happen. But the whole slippery slope fallacy means that none of those can necessarily be held up on their own. But when you take the whole thing and you look, whenever you make a judgment for the long term, and I think that's one of the main problems with our society, is we're looking at this at just the here and now. We really are. A lot of the no on 8 will say, oh, well, this is supposed to be about equality and we need to enter a new age, but the whole thing is equality, regardless of how you view equality. If social stability doesn't always enjoin that, if the society that initially starts to to seek any level of equality if that society fails, if it collapses, if it falls apart. After, whether it's 2 or 3 generations or 10 or 20 generations, if it falls apart because of errors or problems in how it has spread or liberalized itself, it really doesn't matter in the end what it liberalized, what it made more equal, because if a society, if the Constitution is not regarded by anyone, if society is in collapse, if civilization is gone, it matters very, very little what was actually achieved. Now, that's kind of the premise I'm coming from, is that I want equality, and I want justice, and I want the best, I want love, but I don't want a society that's going to have it for a few generations and fizzle out. I don't want a society that grasps onto the illusion of it and then fizzles out because it was an illusion, or because it wasn't in balance, because it was perhaps giving liberties to somebody while ignoring the rights or the responsibilities on another end. And that's one of the key things with these principles, is you may not have a church be sued and have its tax-exempt status taken away. You likely will not right after this. But the thing is you alter the whole legal system. And when you alter, well, for example, let's go back to the point 1. In the first point, he starts out in his response and he says, California Education Code provides that pupils will receive instruction to aid them in making decisions in matters of personal, family, and community health. Okay, so the law is regarding health. He says here the focus is on health. Now, what happens when you redefine what is health? What is considered healthy? What is considered proper? What is considered within a person's welfare? When you change that view, then you also inherently end up changing what it means to have that infringed upon. When you change what it means to have it infringed upon, you change what offenses are, because all of a sudden, if you can infringe upon somebody a different way, then offenses can be committed in a different way whenever that's infringed upon. And so this whole idea of changing what a family is and what a marriage is, and what people are entitled to, or what they're entitled, what health is and what family is and what marriage is, it all feeds back in. And when it all feeds back in, and again, it's not this right away domino, but you can reach the point where if you've redefined, again, for example, what health consists of for persons, families, or communities, then you can alter the laws as far as what are offenses. And if you can alter what are offenses, you can use them to include any number of things. Because if you can redefine something as foundational as marriage, the other little steps aren't as hard to fathom. And again, if you're screaming in your head, oh, this is slippery slope fallacy, somebody has to look at all the possible contingencies. I'm not saying what will happen again, but to say that these things are not possible is to deny history, because that's the way things have gone. For better or for worse, that's the way the system has evolved. You've changed perceptions of principles, perceptions of terms, and as these terms and perceptions change, the whole thing changes. And the thing that just kind of I don't get is everybody thinks that because it's changing, because it's evolving like it has, and because many of the evolutions in the past have been for the better, that if we let it keep evolving, then it keeps getting better. Kind of like keeping the bread in the oven for longer makes the bread better. No. You see, simply because we can evolve the system, and simply because the system evolves, does not mean the evolution that we allow or permit or push to happen is good for the whole society, is good for human rights, is good for equality, or is good for justice.